The grand halls of Kensington Palace echoed with an unusual tension that crisp October morning. Prince William walked through the ornate corridors, his footsteps deliberate and heavy against the marble floors. The weight of recent discoveries pressed down on his shoulders like an invisible crown, far heavier than any he would ever wear. Security Chief Thompson approached him with measured steps, carrying a silver laptop that seemed to gleam ominously under the crystal chandeliers. The device belonged to Camilla, the queen consort, and what it contained would shake the very foundations of the royal family's carefully maintained facade. "Your Royal Highness," Thompson said, his voice barely above a whisper despite the empty hallway. "The routine security sweep has revealed something that requires your immediate attention." William's jaw tightened as he accepted the laptop. He had authorized the security check himself after noticing strange behavior patterns around the palace. Staff members had been whispering in corners, and there had been an unusual number of technical difficulties with the palace's internal communication systems. What started as a precautionary measure had uncovered something far more sinister. The laptop felt cold in his hands, its weight seeming to increase with each passing second. William knew that whatever was on this device would change everything. The royal family had weathered many storms, but this felt different. This was personal. This involved his daughter, Charlotte, the bright-eyed princess who brought joy to everyone she met. As they walked toward his private study, William's mind raced back to recent events. Charlotte had been unusually quiet lately, her normally radiant smile appearing forced during public appearances. She had started having nightmares, waking up crying in the middle of the night, calling for her mother. Kate had been concerned, suggesting that perhaps the pressure of royal duties was becoming too much for their young daughter. But now, with this laptop in his possession, William suspected there was something far more troubling at play. The study door closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silence. William placed the laptop on his mahogany desk, the same desk where his father had once sat, making decisions that would affect the monarchy for generations to come. Now, it was William's turn to make such a decision. "What exactly did you find?" William asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Thompson's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. In his 20 years of service to the royal family, he had never encountered anything quite like this. "Sir, there are files on this device that appear to be surveillance footage. Images of Princess Charlotte taken without authorization. And what's more disturbing, sir, is that many of these images show the princess in states of distress." The words hit William like a physical blow. His protective instincts, already heightened by fatherhood, surged to dangerous levels. Charlotte was not just a princess to him. She was his little girl, the child who would run into his arms after a long day of royal duties, who would tell him about her drawings and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. "Show me," William commanded, his voice carrying the authority of future kingship. Thompson opened the laptop, his fingers hesitant on the keyboard. The screen illuminated, revealing a desktop that looked innocent enough at first glance. But as he navigated to a hidden folder buried deep within the system, the true horror began to reveal itself. The first image that appeared on the screen made William's blood run cold. It was Charlotte, sitting alone in the palace garden, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old in the photo, wearing the blue dress she had worn to her grandfather's birthday celebration the previous year. But this wasn't a moment from that joyous occasion. This was something else entirely. Charlotte was crying, her small hands covering her face in a gesture that spoke of deep emotional pain. The image had been captured from a distance, clearly taken without her knowledge. The telephoto lens had caught every detail of her anguish, from the way her shoulders shook with sobs to the way she clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit for comfort. William's hands trembled as he leaned closer to the screen. "When was this taken?" Thompson consulted his notes, his own discomfort evident. "Based on the metadata, sir, this was captured approximately 8 months ago, during the period when Her Majesty Queen Camilla was visiting the palace for the Easter celebrations." The implications began to dawn on William with horrifying clarity. Camilla had been present during many of Charlotte's most vulnerable moments. Family gatherings, private celebrations, quiet afternoons in the palace gardens. Times when a child should feel safe and protected, not surveilled and documented in her moments of distress. More images followed, each one more disturbing than the last. Charlotte crying after falling off her bicycle during a private family moment in the palace courtyard. Charlotte looking frightened and confused during what appeared to be a formal royal lesson, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Charlotte hiding behind a pillar in the palace, clearly trying to escape something or someone that had upset her. "There are over 200 images, sir," Thompson said quietly, "all taken over the past 2 years, all showing Princess Charlotte in various states of emotional distress." William's mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy. This was psychological documentation of his daughter's pain. Someone had been deliberately capturing Charlotte's most vulnerable moments, storing them like trophies. "Have you verified that these images are authentic?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. The lighting, the angles, the settings, everything matched his memories of those times and places. "Yes, sir. Our technical team has confirmed that these images have not been doctored or manipulated in any way. They are genuine photographs taken within palace grounds." The revelation struck William with the force of a lightning bolt. Someone with access to the palace, someone trusted enough to move freely through the royal residences, had been systematically documenting his daughter's emotional pain. And that someone was Camilla, his stepmother, the woman who had married his father and become queen consort. William stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that seemed to underscore the gravity of the situation. He walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Charlotte often played, where she should feel safe and loved. Now those same gardens seemed tainted by the knowledge that someone had been watching, waiting for moments of vulnerability to capture and preserve. "Sir, there's more," Thompson said reluctantly. William turned back to face him, steeling himself for whatever additional horrors awaited. "More images?" "Not just images, sir. There are also video files." And Thompson paused, clearly struggling with how to deliver this next piece of information. "There are documents that appear to be analysis notes, observations about Princess Charlotte's behavior, her emotional responses to various situations." The room seemed to spin around William. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a study. Someone had been treating his daughter like a subject in some twisted psychological experiment, documenting her reactions, analyzing her emotional development for unknown purposes. "I want to see everything," William said, his voice cold with barely contained rage. "Every file, every document, every piece of evidence. And I want a full investigation into how this laptop came to be in Camilla's possession and how these files were created." Thompson nodded, his own expression grim. "Sir, should we inform the Duke of Cambridge immediately? And perhaps Her Majesty the Queen?" William considered this carefully. Kay needed to know, certainly. She was Charlotte's mother, and she had every right to understand why their daughter had been struggling emotionally. But involving others, especially his father and Camilla herself, required careful consideration. "Not yet," William decided. "First, I want to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. If these files exist, if Camilla has been documenting Charlotte's distress for 2 years, then there's a purpose behind it. I need to know what that purpose is before we take any action." As Thompson prepared to leave with instructions to continue his investigation discreetly, William remained standing by the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. The weight of protecting his family, of maintaining the dignity of the crown while ensuring justice for his daughter, settled heavily on his shoulders. He thought about Charlotte, probably in her lessons at this very moment, unaware that her father had discovered the violation of her privacy. He thought about Kate, who would be devastated to learn that someone they trusted had been exploiting their daughter's vulnerable moments. And he thought about Camilla, the woman who had slowly earned a place in their family, who had now revealed herself to be something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The discovery in the laptop was just the beginning. William knew that unraveling this web of deception and betrayal would require all of his strength and wisdom. But as he stood there, looking out at the gardens where his daughter should feel safe, he made a silent vow that justice would be served, no matter the cost to the monarchy or his relationship with his father. The truth would come out, and Charlotte would be protected, even if it meant tearing the royal family apart in the process. 3 days had passed since the laptop discovery, and Prince William found himself living in a state of controlled fury that threatened to consume him. He had barely slept, spending his nights poring over the files with a team of trusted security experts and digital forensic specialists. What they had uncovered painted an even more disturbing picture than he had initially imagined. The palace felt different now, as if the very walls held secrets that William was only beginning to understand. Every corridor seemed to harbor potential surveillance points. Every family gathering now appeared tainted by the possibility of covert documentation. The sanctuary that should have been his children's safe haven had been transformed into something resembling a laboratory where Charlotte's emotional responses were studied and recorded. Kate sat across from William in their private sitting room, her face pale with shock as he finally shared the discovery with her. The laptop sat closed between them on the coffee table, but its presence dominated the space like a malevolent artifact. 2 years, Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. She's been watching Charlotte for 2 years, documenting her tears, her fears, her most private moments. William nodded grimly, reaching across to take his wife's hand. Kate's fingers were ice cold, trembling slightly as the full implications settled in. The forensics team has traced the creation of these files. They weren't just random observations. There's a systematic approach to them, almost clinical in nature. Kate stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to provide comfort. I keep thinking about all those times Charlotte came to us, upset about something that had happened during family gatherings. We thought she was just being sensitive, adjusting to the pressures of royal life. But what if Camilla was deliberately creating situations to provoke these emotional responses? The thought had occurred to William as well, and it was perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire discovery. The analysis documents found on the laptop contained detailed observations about Charlotte's triggers, her emotional patterns, and her coping mechanisms. It read like a psychological profile written by someone with intimate access to a child's daily life. Thompson entered the room quietly, carrying additional files that the investigation had uncovered. His expression was even more grave than it had been 3 days earlier, if that were possible. "Your Royal Highnesses," he began, setting down a thick folder on the table. "The technical analysis has revealed something that I believe you need to know immediately. The surveillance wasn't limited to photographs and videos." William's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "There's evidence of audio recordings, sir. Conversations that Princess Charlotte had, both with family members and during private moments when she believed she was alone. The laptop contains hours of recorded material, dating back nearly 2 years. Kate sank into a chair, her composure finally cracking. She recorded our daughter's private conversations, her prayers, her moments of sadness. Yes, ma'am. The recordings appear to have been made using sophisticated surveillance equipment that would require significant technical knowledge to install and operate. This wasn't a casual invasion of privacy. This was a comprehensive surveillance operation. William's mind raced as he processed this new information. The level of planning and technical sophistication required for such an operation suggested that Camilla hadn't acted alone. Someone with expertise in surveillance technology had helped her, or perhaps she was working under someone else's direction. "Have you been able to determine where these recording devices were placed?" William asked, dreading the answer. Thompson consulted his notes. "Based on the audio quality and ambient sounds, our experts believe there were recording devices in Princess Charlotte's bedroom, the family dining room, the music room where she takes her piano lessons, and several locations throughout the palace gardens. The violation felt complete and absolute. Charlotte's most private spaces, the places where a child should feel completely safe and free to express herself, had been compromised. Every bedtime prayer, every conversation with her brothers, every moment of childhood vulnerability had been captured and analyzed. Kate stood up again, her movements sharp and agitated. I want to see those documents. The analysis reports. I want to know exactly what Camilla was thinking, what she was planning. William hesitated. He had read through the analysis documents himself, and they contained observations that would be devastating for any parent to read. The clinical detachment with which Charlotte's emotional responses were documented, the careful notation of her fears and insecurities, the systematic recording of her most vulnerable moments. It all painted a picture of exploitation that was almost too painful to comprehend. Kate, perhaps we should discuss this with the team first. These documents are quite disturbing, and I'm not sure, no. Kate interrupted, her voice stronger now, filled with maternal fury. Someone has been studying my daughter like a laboratory specimen for 2 years. I have the right to know what they discovered, what they thought they learned about her. Thompson opened the laptop and navigated to the analysis documents. The files were labeled with clinical precision: subject behavioral patterns, emotional response triggers, vulnerability assessment, and psychological profile development. Kate read over William's shoulder as he opened the first document. The writing was detailed and methodical, describing Charlotte's behavioral patterns with the dispassionate tone of a researcher studying an animal in captivity. Subject demonstrates heightened emotional sensitivity during periods of family stress. One entry read, particularly responsive to perceived disapproval from authority figures. Physical manifestations of distress include tears, withdrawal behavior, and regression to comfort objects. She's writing about our daughter like she's conducting a psychological experiment, Kate said, her voice shaking with rage. The documents revealed a disturbing pattern of deliberate emotional manipulation. Instances where Charlotte had been particularly upset could be traced back to interactions with Camilla or situations that Camilla had orchestrated. The Queen Consort had been systematically testing Charlotte's emotional boundaries, pushing her to points of distress, and then documenting the results. Look at this, William said, pointing to a particularly damning entry dated 6 months earlier. It describes how Charlotte reacted when Camilla criticized her artwork during a family gathering. The note says, subject responded as predicted to authoritative criticism. Tears initiated within 30 seconds. Withdrawal behavior lasted approximately 45 minutes. Recovery required maternal intervention and positive reinforcement. Kate's face had gone completely white. That was the day Charlotte came to me crying, saying that grandmother Camilla told her that her drawing wasn't very good. I thought it was just an unfortunate comment, maybe a misunderstanding. But she did it deliberately. She hurt our daughter deliberately so she could study her reaction. The realization that Camilla had been deliberately causing Charlotte emotional pain for research purposes was almost too much to bear. This wasn't just surveillance. It was systematic psychological abuse disguised as observation. Thompson cleared his throat softly. There's something else, Your Royal Highnesses. The documents make reference to Phase 2 implementation and extended study parameters. It appears that whatever Camilla was doing, she was planning to expand it. William's blood ran cold. Expanded how? The references are somewhat cryptic, sir, but there are mentions of additional subjects and comparative analysis. It's possible that Princess Charlotte wasn't intended to be the only target of this surveillance. The implication hit both parents simultaneously. George and Louis, their other children, might have been next in line for this twisted form of psychological study. The thought of all 3 of their children being subjected to systematic emotional manipulation and surveillance was unbearable. Kate began pacing the room, her maternal instincts in full protective mode. We have to stop this. We have to confront Camilla immediately and demand answers. How dare she treat our children like experimental subjects? William understood his wife's fury, but he also recognized the delicate nature of their situation. Camilla was the queen consort, married to the king. Any accusation against her would have massive implications for the monarchy itself. We need to be strategic about this, William said carefully. If we accuse Camilla without absolute proof, if we create a scandal that damages the crown, it could have consequences that extend far beyond our family. I don't care about the crown right now, Kate replied fiercely. I care about our daughter. I care about the fact that someone we trusted has been psychologically torturing our child for research purposes. Thompson interjected gently. If I may, Your Royal Highnesses, there might be additional evidence that we haven't uncovered yet. The surveillance operation described in these documents would require significant resources and support. It's unlikely that Her Majesty the Queen Consort was working entirely alone. This possibility opened up an even more frightening scenario. If Camilla had been working with others, if there was a network of people involved in the surveillance operation, then the threat to their family's safety and privacy was far greater than they had initially realized. William made a decision that would change the course of the investigation. I want you to expand the forensic analysis. Check every device that Camilla has had access to, every computer, every phone, every piece of technology. I want to know who she's been communicating with, who might be helping her, and what the ultimate goal of this surveillance operation is. And I want to talk to Charlotte, Kate added, her voice heavy with the pain of having to question their daughter about traumatic experiences. She needs to know that we're aware something wrong has been happening, and she needs to feel safe to tell us about any other incidents we might not know about. The task of explaining to a young child that a trusted family member had been secretly watching and recording her most private moments would be one of the most difficult conversations either parent had ever faced. But it was necessary to understand the full extent of the violation and to help Charlotte begin to heal from whatever psychological damage had been done. As the day wore on, more pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. The surveillance equipment found hidden throughout the palace was sophisticated and expensive, far beyond what would be available to a casual observer. The analysis documents showed evidence of professional psychological training, suggesting that Camilla either had advanced knowledge of child psychology or was working with someone who did. Most disturbing of all was the discovery of communication logs showing that the surveillance data was being transmitted to external servers. Charlotte's most private moments, her emotional responses, her psychological vulnerabilities, all of it was being shared with unknown recipients outside the palace. The laptop that had started as a single piece of evidence had opened up a vast conspiracy that threatened not just their family's privacy, but potentially their safety as well. And at the center of it all was Camilla, the woman who had sat at their family dinners, who had attended their children's birthday parties, who had been welcomed into their most intimate family moments while secretly documenting their daughter's emotional pain. As evening fell over the palace, William and Kate faced the grim realization that their fight to protect Charlotte was just beginning. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as William prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult conversation of his life. A week had passed since the laptop discovery, and the investigation had revealed a web of deception so intricate and disturbing that it challenged everything he thought he knew about family loyalty and trust. Kate had spent the previous evening with Charlotte, gently encouraging their daughter to share any memories of feeling uncomfortable or watched during family gatherings. The conversation had been heartbreaking, as Charlotte revealed numerous instances where she had felt uneasy around Camilla, moments when the queen consort had asked probing questions about Charlotte's feelings or had seemed to appear unexpectedly during the child's private moments. She always wanted to know why I was crying, Charlotte had told her mother in her innocent 8-year-old voice. Even when I didn't want to talk about it, she would keep asking questions. Sometimes she would follow me when I tried to go somewhere alone. The investigation had also revealed the full extent of the surveillance network. Hidden cameras and recording devices had been discovered in 12 different locations throughout the palace, all connected to a sophisticated system that transmitted data to external servers. The technical complexity of the operation confirmed that Camilla had not been working alone. Most shocking of all was the discovery of similar surveillance files concerning other royal children across Europe. The laptop contained comparative psychological profiles of young royals from several European monarchies, suggesting that Charlotte was part of a much larger study involving multiple royal families. Now, as William walked toward the blue drawing room where Camilla waited, he carried with him not just evidence of betrayal, but proof of what appeared to be an international conspiracy targeting royal children. Camilla sat in the ornate room with her characteristic poise, dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit that conveyed royal authority. Her expression was serene, giving no indication that she suspected the storm that was about to break around her. She had accepted William's invitation for a private meeting without question, perhaps believing it concerned routine royal duties or family matters. "William, darling," she greeted him warmly as he entered the room. "How lovely to have some time together. You seemed rather distant lately. I hope everything is well with Kate and the children." The casual inquiry about his children felt like a knife twist, knowing what he now knew about her true interest in their well-being. William took a seat across from her, placing the laptop on the coffee table between them with deliberate precision. Camilla's eyes flicked to the device, and, for just a moment, William caught a flash of something that might have been recognition, or perhaps concern. But her composed expression returned so quickly that he might have imagined it. "I wanted to discuss something that's come to my attention," William began, his voice carefully controlled. "Something that involves you directly and has significant implications for our family." "Oh," Camilla's tone remained light, but William noticed her posture had stiffened slightly. "Whatever could that be?" William opened the laptop and turned it so that the screen faced Camilla. The first image that appeared was one of the most damaging pieces of evidence. A photograph of Charlotte crying alone in the palace garden, clearly taken from a concealed position with a telephoto lens. The reaction was immediate and telling. Camilla's face went completely white, and her hands gripped the arms of her chair with enough force that her knuckles showed through her skin. For several seconds, she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the screen with an expression of shock that seemed genuine. "I can explain," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I sincerely hope you can," William replied, his tone carrying all the authority of his future kingship. "Because what I've discovered on your laptop is evidence of a systematic surveillance operation targeting my daughter. 2 years of covert photography, audio recordings, and psychological analysis of Charlotte's most private moments." Camilla closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, her expression had changed completely. The warm, grandmotherly facade had disappeared, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "You don't understand the full picture," she said, her voice gaining strength. "This wasn't done to hurt Charlotte. It was done to protect her, to protect all of you." "Protect her?" William's voice rose despite his attempts to maintain control. "You've been systematically documenting my daughter's emotional distress for 2 years. You've been deliberately causing her pain so you could study her reactions. How exactly is that protection?" Camilla leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The monarchy faces threats that you can't even imagine, William. There are people, organizations, governments that would do anything to find weaknesses they could exploit in the royal family. By understanding Charlotte's psychological profile, by knowing her vulnerabilities, we can better prepare her to face those threats." The explanation was so twisted, so fundamentally wrong, that William struggled to find words to respond. "You're talking about my 8-year-old daughter as if she's a military asset that needs psychological profiling. She's a child, Camilla. A child who should feel safe and loved in her own home." "She is loved," Camilla insisted. "Everything I did was motivated by love and concern for her future. Do you think being a royal child is just about pretty dresses and palace parties? She'll face pressures and manipulations that ordinary children never encounter. By understanding how she responds to stress, how she copes with emotional challenges, We can better prepare her. William pulled up more files on the laptop, showing Camilla the analysis documents that detailed Charlotte's emotional triggers and vulnerabilities. This reads like a torture manual, not a protection protocol. You documented exactly how to make my daughter cry, how long it takes her to recover from emotional distress, what methods are most effective for causing her psychological pain. Information is power, William. In the wrong hands, that psychological profile could be used to manipulate Charlotte. In our hands, it could be used to protect her from such manipulation. The twisted logic was becoming clearer now, but it made the betrayal no less devastating. Camilla genuinely believed that she had been acting in Charlotte's best interests, that systematically violating the child's privacy and deliberately causing her emotional distress was somehow a form of protection. Who else is involved in this? William demanded, pulling up the communication logs that showed data being transmitted to external sources. This surveillance operation is too sophisticated for you to have managed alone. For the first time since the conversation began, Camilla hesitated. Her eyes darted away from William's face, and he could see her calculating how much to reveal. There are protocols, she said carefully. Security protocols that extend beyond just our family, beyond just the British monarchy. When royal children reach a certain age, when they begin to take on public duties, there are assessments that need to be made. You're talking about other royal families. The comparative profiles I found on your laptop. You're part of some kind of international surveillance network targeting royal children. Camilla's silence was confirmation enough. The scope of the conspiracy was even broader than William had imagined. Multiple royal families across Europe were apparently subjecting their children to similar psychological profiling under the guise of security preparation. My daughter is not a national security asset, William said, his voice cold with fury. She's not a potential weakness to be studied and documented. She's a child who deserves privacy, safety, and the right to emotional development without being treated like a laboratory subject. You're being naive, William. Charlotte will be queen someday. She needs to be prepared for the psychological warfare that comes with that position. The surveillance, the manipulation attempts, the constant pressure. If we don't understand her psychological makeup now, how can we protect her from those who would exploit it later? The conversation was revealing not just the extent of Camilla's betrayal, but a fundamental difference in their understanding of what it meant to protect royal children. Camilla saw Charlotte as a future monarch who needed to be psychologically mapped and understood to prevent exploitation. William saw her as his daughter who deserved childhood innocence and emotional security. The recording devices hidden throughout the palace, William continued, showing Camilla the evidence of the surveillance equipment. Some of them were in Charlotte's bedroom. You recorded her private conversations, her bedtime prayers, her moments of fear and sadness when she thought she was alone. Those recordings provided valuable insights into her coping mechanisms, her emotional resilience, her stop. William's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. Stop trying to justify the unjustifiable. You violated my daughter in the most fundamental way possible. You destroyed her sense of safety in her own home. You turned family gatherings into psychological experiments. Camilla stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking under the weight of William's accusations. I've dedicated my life to this family, to this monarchy. Everything I've done has been in service to the crown. If you can't see that, if you can't understand a larger picture, then perhaps you're not ready to be king. The insult hung in the air between them, but William didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he closed the laptop and stood as well as height and presence dominating the ornate room. Your services to this family are no longer required, he said with quiet authority. You will surrender all surveillance equipment, all files, all access credentials to the security team immediately. You will provide a complete list of everyone involved in this operation, and you will never again have unsupervised access to my children. You can't make that decision, Camilla protested. I'm a queen consort. My father will be informed of everything we've discussed today. He'll see the evidence, he'll read the files, and he'll understand exactly what you've done to his granddaughter. But regardless of his response, my decision stands. You will not hurt my children again. As William moved toward the door, Camilla made one final attempt to justify her actions. You'll understand someday, William. When Charlotte faces her first real threat, when someone tries to manipulate her or exploit her vulnerabilities, you'll remember this conversation. You'll wish you had the information I was gathering. William paused at the doorway and turned back to face her one final time. The only threat Charlotte has faced in the past 2 years has been you, Camilla. The only person who exploited her vulnerabilities was you. The only one who manipulated her emotions and violated her trust was you. The confrontation was over, but William knew that the real battle was just beginning. He would now have to face his father, explain the evidence, and demand justice for his daughter. The revelation would rock the monarchy to its core, but protecting Charlotte was worth any price, including the potential destruction of his relationship with his father and stepmother. As he walked away from the blue drawing room, William felt the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. The laptop under his arm contained evidence that could destroy the royal family's reputation, but it also contained the truth about what had been done to his daughter. And for William, the truth was more important than any crown, any title, or any family relationship that had been built on deception and betrayal. The throne room had witnessed countless moments of royal drama throughout its centuries of existence, but few could match the gravity of what was unfolding on this gray November morning. King Charles sat in his ceremonial chair, his face bearing the weight of a man who had discovered that his wife had betrayed his family in the most fundamental way imaginable. William stood before his father, flanked by Kate and the full investigative team that had spent the past 2 weeks unraveling the conspiracy that had targeted Charlotte. The evidence was overwhelming, spread across tables like pieces of a puzzle that revealed a picture too dark to have been conceived by any loving family member. The surveillance network extended across 7 European royal families, Security Chief Thompson reported, his voice echoing in a vast chamber. Princess Charlotte's psychological profile was being shared with analysts in multiple countries, all under the guise of developing comprehensive security protocols for royal children. Charles aged visibly as each new detail was revealed. The man who had waited decades to become king now faced the possibility that his reign would be defined not by his service to the nation, but by the actions of the woman he had chosen to marry. Camilla stood at the far end of the room, her dignity intact despite the circumstances, but her isolation complete. Even her personal security detail had been reassigned pending the full investigation. She was no longer the queen consort in anything but title. She was a woman who had systematically violated the trust of the family she had married into. 2 years, Charles said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. For 2 years, you documented my granddaughter's emotional pain. You turned family gatherings into psychological experiments. You made our home into a laboratory. I was protecting her, Camilla replied, her voice steady despite the devastating evidence arrayed against her. Every royal child faces these threats. The psychological profiling, the manipulation attempts, the constant pressure to find weaknesses. If we don't understand Charlotte's vulnerabilities, others will discover and exploit them. Kate stepped forward, her maternal fury barely contained by royal protocol. You recorded her bedtime prayers, Camilla. You documented the nights she cried herself to sleep. You deliberately caused her distress so you could study her reactions. That isn't protection, that's abuse. The word hung in the air like an accusation that could not be taken back. Abuse. It was perhaps the most serious charge that could be leveled against a member of the royal family, and the evidence supported it completely. William moved to stand beside his wife, presenting the final piece of evidence that would seal Camilla's fate. The communication logs show that Charlotte's psychological profile was shared with external analysts who had no authorization to access royal family information. You didn't just violate our daughter's privacy, you compromised her security. Charles closed his eyes, the weight of his decision visible in every line of his weathered face. When he opened them again, he was no longer looking at his wife as a husband, but as a king faced with protecting his subjects, including his own granddaughter. "The evidence is clear and undeniable," Charles said, his voice carrying the full authority of the crown. "Camilla, by your actions, you have violated the trust of this family and compromised the security of a royal child. Your position as queen consort is hereby suspended pending a full investigation by both royal security and external authorities." The pronouncement sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Suspending a queen consort was unprecedented in modern royal history, but the circumstances were equally unprecedented. Camilla's composure finally cracked. "Charles, you cannot seriously believe that I meant any harm to Charlotte. Everything I did was motivated by love and concern for her future." "Love?" Kate's voice rose despite the formal setting. "You call it love to hide cameras in our daughter's bedroom? You call it love to record her private conversations and analyze her emotional responses like she's a test subject?" "The monarchy faces threats that none of you understand," Camilla replied, her voice gaining desperation. "There are organizations, governments, individuals who would do anything to find psychological leverage against royal families. By understanding Charlotte's makeup, we could prepare her for those threats." "By becoming the threat yourself," William countered. "Charlotte hasn't faced any external psychological manipulation, Camilla. The only person who has systematically exploited her vulnerabilities is you." Charles stood slowly, his advanced age evident in the careful way he moved. "The investigation has revealed communication with analysts in countries that do not have friendly relationships with Britain. Information about Charlotte's psychological profile was shared with entities that could potentially use it against our family or our nation. This revelation was perhaps the most damaging of all. Not only had Camilla violated Charlotte's privacy and dignity, but she had potentially compromised national security by sharing sensitive information about a future heir to the throne." "I want to see Charlotte," Camilla said suddenly, her royal bearing finally giving way to something more desperate. "I want to explain to her that everything I did was to protect her. She needs to understand, no." The word came from William with such finality that it seemed to echo off the throne room's stone walls. "You will never again have unsupervised access to my children. In fact, given the scope of your betrayal, I question whether you should have any access to them at all." Charles looked at his son with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride that William was protecting his family with such determination, and sorrow that it had come to this point. "What about the other royal families?" Kate asked, addressing the broader implications of the conspiracy. "If this surveillance network extends across multiple countries, shouldn't they be informed that their children have been subjected to similar violations?" Thompson nodded. "We've already initiated contact with security chiefs in the affected monarchies. The response has been significant. Several royal families are conducting their own investigations based on our findings." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Multiple royal children across Europe had been subjected to covert surveillance and psychological profiling, all coordinated through a network that Camilla had helped to establish and maintain. "There will be prosecutions," Charles announced, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision, "both within our family and externally. The individuals and organizations involved in this surveillance network will be held accountable under the full extent of the law." For the first time since the confrontation began, Camilla seemed to truly understand the magnitude of her situation. What she had viewed as protective security measures were being treated as criminal violations of privacy and potentially treasonous sharing of national security information. "Charles, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to hurt Charlotte. I genuinely believed I was protecting her." "Protecting her from what?" William demanded. "From having a normal childhood? From feeling safe in her own home? From trusting the adults who are supposed to care for her?" The questions hung unanswered because there were no good answers. Camilla's actions, regardless of her intentions, had caused profound psychological harm to an innocent child and violated the most basic principles of family trust and security. Over the following days, the full scope of the resolution became clear. Camilla would be removed from all official royal duties indefinitely. The surveillance network would be dismantled completely, with all collected data destroyed under court supervision. The security protocols for royal children would be completely reviewed and revised to prevent any similar violations in the future. Most importantly for the Wales family, extensive therapy and support services were arranged for Charlotte to help her process the violation of her privacy and rebuild her sense of security. Child psychologists specializing in trauma recovery were brought in to ensure that the long-term effects of the surveillance would be minimized. The public announcement was carefully crafted to protect Charlotte's privacy while acknowledging that serious security breaches had occurred. The palace statement referenced unauthorized surveillance activities and violations of royal family privacy without going into the devastating details of what Charlotte had endured. In private, the healing process was more complex. Charlotte, with the help of trained counselors, began to understand that the uncomfortable feelings she had experienced around Camilla were valid, that her instinct that something was wrong had been correct. She learned that the adults who truly loved her would never deliberately cause her emotional pain for any reason. Kate threw herself into the process of rebuilding Charlotte's sense of security, spending extra time with her daughter, reassuring her that their home was safe again, that the people she trusted would never betray that trust. The recording devices had been removed, the hidden cameras dismantled, and new security protocols implemented to ensure that such violations could never occur again. William found himself changed by the experience in ways he hadn't expected. The fierce protectiveness he felt for his children had always been strong, but the betrayal had awakened something deeper and more uncompromising. He would never again take for granted the safety and privacy that his children deserved. The relationship between Charles and his eldest son evolved as well. The king's decision to prioritize his granddaughter's welfare over his relationship with his wife had demonstrated a commitment to family that William had sometimes questioned. In choosing justice for Charlotte over personal loyalty to Camilla, Charles had proven that his role as grandfather superseded even his role as husband. As for Camilla, she retreated from public life entirely, her reputation and her position in the royal family destroyed by her actions. The woman who had once been seen as a stabilizing influence on the monarchy was now viewed as someone who had violated the most sacred trust possible, the protection of a child. The laptop that had started it all was eventually destroyed, its contents preserved only in encrypted files held by security services for potential future legal proceedings. But the damage it had revealed could never be completely erased. Charlotte's childhood innocence had been violated in a way that no amount of therapy or support could completely undo. In the wake of the tragedy, the Wales family emerged stronger and more united than ever before. They had faced a threat from within their own circle and had chosen to prioritize truth, justice, and the protection of their children over all other considerations. Charlotte, surrounded by genuine love and security for the first time in 2 years, began to heal. Her nightmares became less frequent, her smiles more genuine, her trust in the adults around her slowly rebuilding. The tears that Camilla had documented so clinically became less common, replaced by the natural joy and wonder that should define any child's life. The royal family had weathered many scandals throughout its long history, but few had been as personal or as devastating as the betrayal that targeted the most innocent member of their family. In choosing to confront that betrayal head-on, regardless of the consequences, they had demonstrated that some principles were more important than any title, any tradition, or any relationship built on deception. The throne room where the confrontation had taken place would witness many more moments of royal drama in the years to come, but none would be more significant than the day a king chose to protect his granddaughter over protecting his marriage, and a father chose justice over family loyalty. In that choice, the true meaning of royal duty was revealed, not the protection of the institution, but the protection of those who were most vulnerable within it.